Welcome to the RevOps Lab, a podcast exploring the art and science of revenue operations. To find more episodes and resources on scaling your revenue engine, visit getweflow.com/RevOps. Before we dive into today's episode, here's a quick insight. We asked the community how they capture activities in Salesforce. The result? Almost 2/3 of you use Einstein Activity Capture or Salesforce for Gmail and Outlook. And while it's great that you care about activity capture, those solutions can be quite problematic. For example, running reports and analyzing your activity data is often a nightmare with Einstein Activity Capture. And those who use Salesforce for Outlook or Gmail often miss activities because logging them is manual and time-consuming for your reps. That's why we built Weflow, a Salesforce activity capture solution. Hundreds of revenue teams use Weflow to auto-capture emails, meetings, and contacts. Weflow then permanently stores your activities in Salesforce so you can run activity reports, build automations, and get better insights. You can even sync past activities for up to 24 months. And with our admin console, you have full control over your setup. The best thing about Weflow? You're up and running in less than 30 minutes. So visit getweflow.com/activity to learn more and get your free trial today. Thanks, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
So hey, and welcome to another episode of the RevOps Lab. We're here with Tom van Langen. And actually, it's not the first time, it's the second time, because we loved the first time so much. Tom, welcome back.
It's great to be back on the pod. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, first pod 2025. So expectations are very, very high, And how was your Christmas time? Did you have some time off? Or?
Got some time off, which is always a little bit challenging with a year end in there, but managed to squeak a couple days here and there. But yeah, great holidays, close the year off strong. So yeah, excited for 2025.
Yeah, awesome. Same here. And we got Philip as well. So yeah, let's dive in. So today we talk about the fun and easy topic of operationalizing the plan, right? And I think we've all probably spent quite some time planning for this year. So maybe let's kick off with, why do you think this is important?
Yeah, I think it's a great time to be having this conversation. It's January. I think a lot of the team is exhausted at this point. You just got through Q4, or at least for a lot of companies, and you've spent the past couple of months like deep in planning. You have built every model upwards, downwards, capacity plans, bottoms up. You've tailored it by region, by segment, done different territories, setups. At this point, you're just really ready to get it out the door. Right, to finish it. But how do you make that plan a reality? And I think it's a perfect time to make sure that months of hard work doesn't go to waste.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody can feel you. Not just that Q4 is always just super, high energy, pressured to close the year strong, but then all those conversations, right? And the coordination with all the different stakeholders to get to a budget and a plan, and all the fun things, and then you end up in January, and okay, where do you go from here? So I mean, usually, right, these plans, they're like quite strategic, I'd say. All the executives are involved. There's like very clear idea about how you plan out the next year. But then like, in your experience, right? Like, how do you turn this strategy or this plan into action?
Yeah. I think that what I've seen across a bunch of different companies is that the planning process can be disorganized sometimes, but typically leads to great outcome. So to your point, you get the management team around what some of those critical priorities are. You're planning with several different models and with the data to drive the business forward. I think one of the biggest challenges is, how do you turn that strategy into action? How do you make it, executable in a way? And one of the, I think, biggest, let's say, misnomers or misconceptions about it is that you hear people saying, I'm ready to get back to my day job at this point. Like you're done with planning. you put in all of this work. I'm ready to get back to my day job, which is, supporting go-to-market, customer success, sales, marketing, in whatever way that the team has. But the reality that I see for RevOps is the strategy needs to be your day job. Like at its core, the strategy needs to be your day job, and really what you continue to make that plan a reality.
I think one of the tough parts here is it's really hard to, I think it's one thing to you in your RevOps role to say, okay, hey, I need, 3 out of my 5 days execution of the strategy, and 2 days is other admins. But then the other part that I think is super tricky here is that RevOps alone rarely can execute the plan, right? Alone, at least. So they need to have support. They need to bring in more people, support them, run with them, and then also make time to operational. And so I think like a key part here is like not only to free up yourself, also in advance to the whole operationalization. You need to also actually make sure, hey, like head of product person or, like head of sales here and there, like, in January, in February, like you need to have like, whatever, like you need to have that available, help me or make it a success.
I think it's absolutely true. It's not just RevOps that's going to make the plan successful, but it's not that product manager either, or the sales leader. Mm-hmm. It's the company that makes it successful. And that's why I think the strategy needs to be your day job. Don't get me wrong. Everybody's dealing with the day-to-day things. And of course, more automation, more process improvements, freeing up more time is definitely important. But, I'll give you an experience, at least from myself, is, I landed at a company a couple of years ago, mid-year. And, I showed up, and one of the first things I did is I, had time. I just joined. So I looked at their annual plan, and I was asked we're trying to turn the strategy into action. How are we doing? Help us do this. So looking at the annual plan, it looked awesome, Philip, like so good, like the slides, what they were doing, all the material. But then I went and one of the items was we're launching a new service, and we were trying to achieve, X bookings for this new service. The product manager is the owner of this new service. We're going to achieve it. And, that product manager was absolutely responsible for that goal, but they're not the only one. So was marketing, because they have to build pipeline, and sales actually needs to book the deal, and pricing and packaging needed to get it on the list, and RevOps should be inspecting it. So every team is really doing it. And the challenge in this situation is I found that service or that item was the 6th priority for about everybody around the company. Just never made the cut. It was there, but it was always the 6th item on everybody's to-do list. So it's really, how do you get it from the paper to making it a reality for all the teams? That it's really integrated into your operating plan, that the people on the shop floor are saying the same thing as the C-suite, because frequently I think the C-suite is really good with their priorities for the coming year, but it's turning it into action is how do you get it to immersed in the company for 12 months?
I mean, fully agree. And I think often like you have the sales kickoff, but then this is very focused on the sales side of things. So this often feels like a kickoff, but I also like speaking product experience, also like, you often feel a bit detached from. So there's like marketing is still a bit involved in this depending on the company, product, engineering, other functions often. So do you have like a framework or like some methodology that you think has worked well in your past with companies that ensure that?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's kind of my mental checklist when we're just getting through, or actually just at this point. So you're it's pre-sales kickoff or like a company kickoff. You're just working through compensation plans, finalizing items, rolling out territories and segments. So how do we start to put this into the practice for the company this coming year? I'm just going to run. There are 5 items. I'm somebody that believes in goals of like 3 or 5. So naturally, I come here to RevOps Lab with like 5 items that I tend to think about. So one is like to step back and reassess your strategic priorities and communicate them in the organization. That's the first one. 2 is provide concrete guidance. Be really clear about what you're trying to achieve. 3 is RevOps needs to role model the strategy. Number 4 is connect the strategy to the go-to-market operating cadence. And number 5, measure the delivery of the strategy. And I think that those 5 items have been helpful for me to think through. Every year you're trying to make the plan more actionable, but like coming back to them has been helpful for me to make plans truly actionable during the year. And I'm glad to take you through some of those.
Yeah, let's maybe start with the first one, right? Like, obviously, right? I think your example was great because you mentioned it was like the 6th item on the list, right? So it didn't really make the cut. How do you communicate your strategic priorities, to the entire company so that everybody knows what you're actually talking about? How do you focus the entire company, ideally, including Philip's example of also product engineering, right? Like, do you have any best practices there?
Yeah. First of all, like planning is a long process. You have to remember, like your leadership team started their long range planning in Q1. A lot of companies start planning like the detailed planning process in Q3, budgets build up. You got to step back. Those priorities have probably been muddled and wordsmithed like so many times. You have to really make sure that they mean what you want them to mean. Mm-hmm. And you got to limit to a handful. I said 3 to 5. I really mean 3 to 5. It's the hardest things to do. But if you're coming up with 6, cut one of them, 3 to 5. It's the way to go. You should be focused on some of the midterm objectives. And I really like to try to make them a rally cry and to make them memorable. Whether you're using strategic priorities or OKRs, the way that they have to be communicated needs to be a rally cry for the company. To me, I always remember when I was at Autodesk, and I was at Autodesk during their subscription transformation. So they were going from the old world. This was like, over 10 years ago, but they were going from the old world of perpetual licensing to subscription. And they came out one year and their current CEO was brilliant with strategy, is brilliant with strategy. And he came out with 12, 20, 50. 12, 20, 50 was the numbers that everybody remembered. And he even presented it as an equation. And it was a 12% billings increase plus 20% increase in more value per subscriber equals 50% increase in the number of subscribers. And it was so fascinating, like that goal and how it weighed out, because the numbers still echo like a decade later in my head. But like different parts of the company were really actually focused on different things. More value per subscriber, clearly focused on customer success. The more subscribers component, clearly focused at your marketing and your new logo sales team. The billings was like, how does every other function make sure you're optimizing for the billings and ultimately the financial outcome for the company? So it really did a great job. You see startups do this really well too. Like we're going to plan 100 new logos next year. That's an awesome rally cry. Like at the end of each quarterly all hands, I love that. Or we're going to create 100 million of new pipeline. Those are the types of, by the way, hundreds are just random numbers I'm pulling out, but it's a rally cry that really like brings your team together. That I love about like that first one to look at.
Yeah, I mean, we are unfortunately not yet at 100 million in pipeline generation, but I like that goal as well, for sure.
Yeah.
No, do you think they always have to be quantifiable?
I don't think that they need to be quantifiable. I think that you can typically have a goal that's like you want to be the best at something. I would make them concrete, which actually kind of gets me to the second one. Mm-hmm. So that was a really nice segue. So thank you, Janice. Way to be with that.
Yeah. It wasn't planned, but you're welcome.
Yeah. I think I don't think it always needs to be quantifiable. I know that breaks the whole OKR type of framework, but I do think some parts of the organization, a big thing is launching a product. And it's hard sometimes for you to realize the full value during that fiscal year of launching that. But a part of your organization is enormously vested in getting that live. So the next year you're going to measure it, but this year might be just on hitting that milestone at its core. Mm-hmm. But make it concrete. So you can go out with a nice rally cry that's, have one, well, what's one of them? 100 new logos. But how are you going to do that is important for making it concrete. You don't want it to be 100 new logos. See you guys in 3 months. We're going to talk about it in the QBR. No, what are we going to do to do that? A recent company I was at, was really crystal clear where they said, we're going to deploy a new sales methodology. Focused on force management. We're going to use an ICP demand strategy targeting, these types of accounts. They were very clear about the items that they were changing and the guidance to different teams that helps achieve that combined outcome. So make it concrete to a very to as detailed as you can possibly go about what you're expecting teams to do.
So you mean the guidance should be on how to achieve those goals? Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to give you an example of that, which is you can say that example for Autodesk of more value per subscriber that I gave. Well, how are we going to achieve that? Well, focus on customer outcomes. What does that mean? That's what you should do, but I'm on that team. Focus on customer outcomes. Okay, thanks, everyone. What are you actually going to do, and what's the change that's involved in that's concrete that the team is taking action on in the coming year?
Here is a quick case study on activity capture from Plecklane. At first, Plecklane's sales team manually logged emails and meetings with Salesforce for Gmail, leaving around 20% of activities unrecorded. Plecklane then decided to roll out Einstein Activity Capture, but struggled with the data not being permanently stored nor reportable and missing custom logging rules. Without full visibility into activities, Plecklane couldn't properly analyze sales efforts by accounts or reps. Reporting on sales efficiency and velocity was very challenging. After running a quick pilot with Weflow, Plecklane rolled out Weflow Activity Capture organizational-wide. In addition to auto-capturing emails and meetings, the team uses Weflow's Gmail extension to further improve their opportunity activity data. Since adopting Weflow Activity Capture, Plecklane is in full control of their activity data. Visit getweflow.com/activity to learn more and try Weflow for free. Thanks, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Personally, I do have to say, I do like the equation approach a lot more, because I think from there, it's pretty concrete, in my opinion, explains the underlying motion, right? So it gives you sort of guidance. Okay, this is the mechanics, and now go and figure out how to impact that. And I think there's also a bad example. I just want to mention one that I had experience in my past. Basically, it was on Net Promoter. And I have the best in the industry. And first of all, you don't know, this is one of those where you don't know how others are calculating the Net Promoter score, right? Then you have some random Net Promoter flying around. And it's very easy to cheat it. Or you only send the survey to, or something like this, right? So just want to say, I think even concrete sometimes actually needs to go.
No, 100%, right? I think Sorry.
No, go ahead, Janice. Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking of that, right? I think when you give out a goal, it's always in context of the size of the organization, right? If you have 10,000 people, and it's very different to 100 people or 1,000 people, right? And then I think what you do with an Autodesk approach is that you give some freedom to the intelligence of the team to come up with the idea of how to get there. But then you also suggest some programs, right? And I think this is actually nice, right? So it's basically kind of what are the current assumptions of programs or projects or roadmaps that lead to those outcomes. But those are maybe specific in terms of guidance, but it's a guidance, right? It can change. And I think that's a very realistic approach, because often, in plans, you have changes, right? So I think, at least in my experience, for example, planning for a new product launch and, putting a revenue number to it, very bad practice, right? Because you just don't know. So always assuming, okay, this is what's working right now. How can we do it better? And then this might be kind of a bonus, right? But you because otherwise what you do is you redirect attention away from what really moves the needle in terms of the core business outcomes. And so, I really like this, combination of kind of hard quantifiable on the top line that is memorable, and then, specific guidance that is treated as something that look, this is our current belief, but maybe in 3 or 6 months, it will look different, and it's okay to change that.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about the Autodesk one is that they communicated at that high level, and they actually did change the metrics. About 2 years later, they realized, okay, this worked pretty well, and they adjusted it, and it became a different set of numbers that they were communicating out. I always reflect back at that one because it was really memorable, and it had stuck with me. That the executive team did an awesome job with rolling out that strategy. Really, after all these years, it's really stuck with me. And every team, to your point, Janice, really knew, hey, we're going to try to move the needle on this number. And that's what they were trying to do. And they all had their own related programs and items with it. So I even think your type of rally cry that worked really well because it was so multifaceted for a large company, but for a smaller company, just making it a clear rally cry and making it the concrete actions can really go a long way to making that strategy successful, right? And inevitably, RevOps is at the core of helping define some of that with the leadership team in the annual planning process. So now make sure it continues to be strong. So
yeah. So maybe good segue to role model the strategy, right? Kind of, what do you mean with that?
Yeah. RevOps has to always be on with strategy. And this is one of the big items that I think I meant with the strategy needs to be your day job. By the very definition, RevOps is working across and triaging the whole go-to-market organization. So you have to role model it. And this isn't just the leader needs to role model it. I think it's the team needs to role model it. And every conversation you go to, you need to be talking about the strategy. The actions need to be consistent with the strategy. So if you're going in and you're not talking about one of the strategic priorities, you're and always stuck in the minutia of something, it's the strategic items will always take second seat. So you have to make sure that it's very cliche to say this, but your roadmap, everybody knows the classic for RevOps, which is it's better when everyone's rowing in the same direction, and it's really true, right? You're trying to get the whole organizing going in the same way. But I've seen great things that other go-to-market ops leaders share out and their roadmaps. And you want to make sure that your team's roadmap is consistent with the strategy and you're really evangelizing it everywhere you go around that strategy, around the company. I think that's it. That's how you make it not be the sixth item on the list. It will continue to be top of mind for everybody that you're working with.
Yeah. What immediately pops to my head is like, okay, well, that's kind of the theory, but then the reality, I saw a video from Matt Walms yesterday, waking up, getting pinged on Slack all the time on so many different operational topics, right? And yeah, I totally love that as well. And, I think, how do you use kind of the North Star metrics to say no? How do you make sure that you don't get derailed, right? Like, what are some tips there?
Yeah, wow, that's a really good question of like productivity. I love that too, because you're constantly, we're constantly getting bombarded and can be so reactive to all of these items because the list is never ending of what's going on. I think that some of the items I've done is, I'll just throw them out. I think people have different strategies that work to them, but I love the Eisenhower principle or Eisenhower matrix, which is a 2x2 impact and importance. And when I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'll frequently lay out everything I'm working on those two dimensions to see what's falling in, because a part of everybody's day needs to be on the operational items. But if you're never getting to the strategic items, you will not drive that business growth that everybody's looking for. So how do you balance the two, and what's the time sucks for you? And then I do that every once in a while. You can't do that every day. That's not reasonable. So like my very simple hack is like, what are the top three things? It's so simple. I'm very old fashioned. I keep a notebook, but what are the three things I'm going to do today? And if those three things don't align with something that really moves the business, it's like approve this quote in Salesforce. That's not really doing a lot. It's got to be moving the business forward. Those are my two, like, let's say, prioritization hacks that I've used, Janice, but it's a constant battle for any team. And that's why I think that you need to be modeling it. And how do you avoid burnout of RevOps in the process is you have to turn away some of the reactive items. So what are the reactive items that are going to, that are really important that you do versus, which are just nice to have items?
Yeah. Maybe sharing a lesson learned from my days at Fiber when we were around 250, I think 300 people. Product priorities became a huge challenge for go-to-market, and how do we communicate those out? So we basically installed kind of a prioritization meeting where everybody could voice, but then still everybody saw the roadmap, everybody agreed on the roadmap. And then we also introduced a newsletter where we kind of regularly shared out the news, because often I think the challenge is not so much the operational day-to-day that comes from the AEs or SDRs. That's also challenging, but the challenging piece is, what if the CRO and the CMO or what have you comes and says, look, we need to completely change course, right? And so you need kind of a forum where that needs to get discussed and be linked back to the strategic priorities. So that's something that worked really well for us back in the days, because it informed everyone around the table, especially those who who have the power to change course. And you need to hold those folks also accountable, right, to the wider common goal. And as I always was part of the executive team, right, so I was like kind of seeing those conflicts from the other side. And they're very true and happening all the time, because folks are also under pressure, right? They typically get fired, right? The average tenure of a CRO is 18, 19, 20 months, right? Which to me is like super value destroying, to be very honest. It's horrible if that's the reality, but like, I think it's something that worked really well for us back in the day. So
I love that. I think it's a great great combination. I've seen like Jeff Ignacio has, who I think you've had on the podcast before. He has like a great go-to-market roadmap that he's put together and even templates around it. And I think it's really good for creating that shared alignment. And you said something that, like, I was thinking back from my experiences in like past companies where it's constantly communicating back, like, this is what we're working on. Here are the things that we're prioritizing because it matches with this, and documenting this. We cannot get to this because it does not match with one of the priorities, and we have to focus on these other things. And sometimes I think reminding a CMO that you can't get to changing, I don't know, something in a newsletter or a flow, right? Like, I'm sorry, I'm making up a scenario as I go here. Like, by saying, remember, we agreed to this as a part of this, and you had seen that before. And that requires pre-work for you to get there. But once you can get that shared alignment, it helps move away some of the noise. And taking your team with you, like, it shouldn't just be a VP of RevOps that's doing that. It should be the whole team that's doing that. Right. So they know that the stuff that they can do. So,
I mean, I think like one big part is like you yourself and mental state and sane, like with everything that's happening around you. And then I think the other part is just sane and on track. And I think actually you had like point, right? Like, and it's quite well. And I think also executing the strategy, because I would argue that, I mean, nearly every executive, like, you know, if you confront them with like, hey, we could do this and this would, you know, maybe have an impact of like, look where we are, you know, the score. Like we are like still 20 off and we want to move there in the quarters. And so, curious, like how you think about how RevOps year long.
I think that being the scorekeeper is being pointed and direct across the teams. You need to understand if the strategy is actually succeeding or it's not, or was the strategy flawed to begin with and achieving that outcome. So you're constantly asking that. And RevOps independence is you're trying to honestly answer that question for the team. But in this process, I choose to be more agile and pivot with it. So like you can be very, very firm and try to, measure the business, be the scorekeeper. And if you're rigid with it, that's all you're ever focused on. But if you need to and the way that you measure something, if it needs to be adapted, do that, right? If your, insight with the business performing, you're not achieving the outcome, why? Explain that. So being agile with how you're interacting with it is important because you're reflecting it back to the business, but ultimately you along with honestly your finance peers are typically the ones that are saying like, is this exceeding or not? And you're looking at it frequently from the leading indicator perspective, and your finance peers are looking at it from like the outcome perspective, which is it having the financial impact of the company. So you want to be ahead on some of those metrics to understand, is it performing, and why is it performing? How do we explain that to, the leadership team or even the board?
Yeah, I think that's the superpower of RevOps, right? You basically can see the future. Nobody else can. It's really like if you do your job well, you see what is going to happen in the next, 2 quarters after. And this is, I think, a good idea of like, the level of, professionalism that you can get to. It's hard to get to, right? I totally get that. But maybe I want to throw in a third one, right? So you have the finance team, the RevOps team, and then you have the executive team, right? So, for example, what we always did is like, look, we know this is the plan, right? We know it can fail, right? But this is what we are signing up for. That's communicated to the board. The board approves it, right? That's a formal process. And then, if we don't hit plan by Q1, Q2, right, we have another plan. And that often comes with, okay, we adjust the cost base, right? And I don't mean like restructuring or so. I mean, often in growth companies, like we just don't hire as quickly as we do, right? And I think this is also really good to think about, right? Like, if you're in RevOps, always think about from like kind of what is the financial metrics, right? What's kind of the investor metrics, and then what's the go-to-market metrics, and what are the leading indicators that feed into that? That essentially are different layers that, if you understand them end to end, it will help you have the different communications. I think we talked about this actually last time, right? Like how do you have a conversation with the executives versus maybe with the finance team versus with the C-suite VPs, and then also the individual contributors, because they all hear and see different things. And they're all ideally they're all aligned, but usually that's not the case, right? So not everybody thinks like in these different layers. And so getting those layers right, I think sometimes helps to understand what is the core priority for the different layers of hierarchy in the organization.
That's a great call.
Okay. Totally segue. So maybe as a recap, can you walk us again, what are the 5 points just for the audience to remember? Just so that everybody remembers again how to turn strategy into action.
Yeah, let's tie this up. Let's put this to action. Operationalize the plans. Really fun word. But the core is strategy should be your day job. And the way that I make it a part of my day job on a regular basis is really through 5 main pillars. The first is reassess and communicate your strategic priorities. The second is provide concrete guidance to the teams. The third is as RevOps, role model the strategy. Number 4, connect the strategy to your go-to-market operating cadence. That's the golden thread. And number 5, be the scorekeeper, as Philip very well described. So
perfect. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Now everybody knows now what to do. You worked hard on your plans. So, and if it doesn't work out this year, at least work towards it. And then maybe next you'll be a little bit.
That's a German doing a pep talk.
I like it. No, I'm like a big cyclist. I love the concept of marginal gains, Team Sky and bike racing, and they're always improving. And that's it. Hey, you might improve the plan a little bit this year, improve it a little bit more next year. You're always going to get better. That's RevOps.
So. Marginal gains, but now it's maximum gains. I'm also a big cycling fan. So yeah. No, good. Yeah, always create a new PB. Right? That's essentially it. You compete against yourself. Tom, that was really, really good. Thank you so much for joining us again. It's good to know that guests are willing to the first episode that we record with them. We also have a new question in place that we like to ask our guests, and I think it's especially good for the beginning of the year. And that is, what's a book that you would recommend to our listeners?
Ooh, a book for listeners. Okay, so we're RevOps, and we're all here right now. I want to make sure I'm gonna butcher his last name, but Revenue Architecture, which just came out in the past year, looks more like a textbook. Jacco, can you help me pronounce his name, because I'm gonna completely butcher it?
Jacco van der Kooi.
Thank you.
More or less.
There we go. Yeah. Yes. It's really it's great getting back to fundamentals, but I also find I'm a very visual learner. So really, really cool for getting up to speed for RevOps these days, and different frameworks around it for different maturity levels. So I highly recommend that. And then you asked the question, it was pretty open-ended. I'm also reading James right now, which is a really good book. So I highly recommend that. So that's just personal reading for everybody. So
thank you so much. Highly appreciate it. And we'll add it to our list, and fully agree. Jacco's book basically has been every RevOps person needs to read to graduate academy world. Okay, good. Enough rambling. Thank you so much, Tom. And
all right, happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the RevOps Lab podcast. Please consider to like and subscribe our show and give us a 5-star rating on wherever you're listening. If you have feedback or suggestions, let us know at podcast@getweflow.com. We read and reply to every email. Thank you.